A ball of fire pierces the atmosphere of Mars, plummeting towards the surface at 13,200 miles per hour. This fireball across the horizon marks the end of a 301 million-mile journey for NASA's InSight and the beginning of a groundbreaking mission. For 5 decades, NASA probes have explored the exterior of the Martian landscape and atmosphere. But now, for the first time, the InSight lander will go deeper than ever before inside the ancient mysteries of the Red Planet. What's inside Mars? And how can the Red Planet help us better understand our own?
Go Atlas. Go InSight.
This is the Atlas V.
4, 3.
On May 5th, 2018, it became the first rocket to launch an interplanetary mission from the west coast of the United States. Cruising through space for 205 days, InSight will fly almost halfway around the Sun and eventually intersect with its final destination, Mars. The fourth planet from the Sun, Mars is the second smallest in the solar system. It's a rocky planet like Earth, but much of what's inside is still a mystery. To give us a window into Mars's deep interior, NASA's InSight lander will check the planet's vital signs for clues. Unlike previous Mars missions, this probe will stay in one place for the duration of its mission. First, it will check its pulse. Its sensitive seismometer will gauge vibrations from meteor impacts or Marsquakes caused by shifting rocks. Listening to these shakes and quakes will make it possible for us to determine the depth and composition of its crust, mantle, and core. Next, InSight will check the planet's temperature. Its heat probe will burrow deep underground up to a depth of 16 feet beneath the Martian surface. This groundbreaking device will measure the planet's interior temperatures and track how they fluctuate throughout the year. To complete its checkup, InSight will test the reflexes of Mars by measuring small changes in a radio signal from Earth. This will show us how much the planet wobbles in its rotation, which can give us clues about its core composition. If Mars has a liquid core, its rotation will be more wobbly. And if its core is more solid, we'll see less wobbling. When studied together, these vital signs will give us valuable insight into rocky planets, as well as improve our understanding of how they form. It's exciting to consider the future possibilities of human habitation on Mars. But as we look forward, we must also make sure to look backwards to learn from our solar system's ancient past. Who knows what secrets the universe might reveal?
Hello and welcome to this show. Google and its cloud platform team recently hosted a 3-day hackathon with CoreLogic International at its Sydney head office. Attendees at the event included 2 of CoreLogic's key banking partners, NAB and Westpac. CoreLogic's Patrick Shallvey, who is the Senior Professional Project Management, joins me to talk about the hackathon, what came out from it, and how it all worked. Patrick, thanks for your time.
No, thanks, Kevin, and thanks for allowing me some time on your show.
Yeah, pleasure. Tell me, what is a hackathon? What's it all about?
Yeah, so hackathon, maybe it's a good place to start. There, people hear the word hacking in sort of IT speak, and they think people are doing nefarious things and hacking into people's systems. It's not really that. Hacking and the thon bit is marathon and hacking joined together. So that's just a bit of the background on the actual term.
So do you do any actual hacking while you're there?
Yeah. What it is, it's really an acceleration in a confined period of time. In our case, it was 3 days where both technical and product people and people representing the business, in our case, in 3 days, had some problems, and they hacked, if you like, and the hacking really comes to say, at the end of that exercise, you're not going to have purpose-built commercial-grade software for your solution, but you've hacked together something that gives the end result to say, hey, this is something pretty cool, and we've got sort of something to go on with it. So if I used an analogy, I was building a car. We may have a really nice chassis and a design, but there's really good potential. And what we ask at the end for the teams participating in the hackathon is, can you show us that potential and give us some real insight as to what you achieved in 3 days? And if that potential's there, then we're saying, right, let's formalize that into a proper sort of project. So that's sort of what a hackathon is at a high level.
I've got some quotes from different people who are in the hackathon. I'll deal with those in a moment and just ask you to qualify them a little bit more. I'm also going to ask you what was achieved, what came out of it. But before I do, question without notice, I often wonder about conferences. I go to a lot of conferences. And you get the business side of the conference where everyone's together and there's something happening. But a lot of the productivity comes after that, once you leave the room. Was that the same here? Did you guys, because you were together for 3 days, did you sort of brainstorm over dinner or have drinks or something? Was there anything came out of that? Is that a dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the dynamics actually started probably 3 or 4 weeks before the event, Kevin.
Okay.
What I mean there is it's fine flying in people. In this case, Google is a partner that we recently globally signed a deal with them in last year for 5 years. So that's both CoreLogic in the US. But we had engaged with their team and also the representatives from our internal product and technology teams, in addition to our banking partners, to say we've got this event, and part of the pre-planning around what we were trying to achieve, what would be the formation of the teams. We did a number of planning sessions, and the intent there is that on that Wednesday morning when we arrived, people already knew each other, in some cases over Skype or over the phone, but they got to meet the people there, so that they weren't sort of, we did the traditional icebreakers and we got sort of people, and Google had some excellent speakers come in and speak about some of their specific technology suites. But a lot of that pre-planning was very, very important, because it's can be a costly exercise pulling people out of the business for 3 days, flights, accommodation, and etc. And so you really want to get the best. So those dynamics were already well and truly formed. Very important. That was a good point.
Can I ask you then what was achieved? And I know in a 5-10 minute interview it's going to be very hard for you to cover all the points, but the outstanding things. What was achieved from this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was doing a marking card here, I'd probably put this into 3 categories, right? The first thing, not just for our hackathon, but for other hackathons, is you want that collaboration there. So in our case, we had the opportunity to meet a number of our new partners, technical experts, product experts, and so forth. Also internally, because CoreLogic's distributed nationally, we had people coming in from Adelaide, we had people coming in from Brisbane, and a lot of Sydney-based folks. So some of those people have never met each other, even though we've been working in the company. So that first thing, collaboration, was really, really important. The second thing that's very important is people learn a lot from the exercise. So if I use an example there, I've got an infrastructure guy, and he's sitting next to a data quant analyst. Now, those people would never normally sit next to each other, but they were actually looking over each other's shoulders. And then we've got a full stack developer talking to a UI expert, and then there's a Google engineer hovering around. So,
sorry, UI is just, what's that?
Oh, that's the user interface. So that's
yes.
what
Okay.
you would see if on a website if you've sort of logged in. So the end of these 3 days on that point two, a lot of people were quite drained and tired because it was a rapid learning curve for them, and we deliberately want to do that so that they come out and they've got extra tricks they can add in terms of then taking back those learnings. The third thing, and we're unabashed about this, it is a bit of a competition. And in our case, we had 3 teams that were tackling 3 pre-identified business problems. And we wanted them to tackle that problem, have their understanding, and at the day 3 present back, not just to the peers and the other 2 teams, but also present back to senior Google people, Westpac, National Australia Bank, and also CoreLogic management about this is what you gave us, this is our thought processes, and they actually presented, in each case, workable software sort of back to the team.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
good.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about that judging process in a moment. Before I do, can I take you to a comment from Greg Dickerson? Greg, of course, from CoreLogic. He was there. He said in some feedback that the group actually focused on actual problems. Can you give me an example of some of the problems that were tackled and looked at by the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So before the event, I mentioned about the pre-planning. So we worked closely with our 2 key banking partners and also our product staff, and we said, blank canvas, give us some really big issues, both using our products and in the industry in general, that are confronting you. Now, we got a list of around 10, and we said we would love to tackle these, but how about we distill that down to something that we can really give it a red hot go, and so we eventually arrived at 3, hence the formation of the 3 teams.
What were those problems?
Yeah, so the first one, and this is sort of a universal issue, is the identification of a property, and that doing an address match on a property. So the use case there in real terms is a user comes to one of our platforms and they type in an address. There's a nice little box there where you can key in the address, and I can't find the property. And yet they are insistent that there's a property there. And so as much as we have smarts in our business, we have various data sources, and we come back and we say, we don't know the property that you're talking about. Now, those of you on your program that would be familiar with Google would say, well, I can go into a Google and it can tell me where there's properties. But the reality is no one company provides 100% clarity on, we know all the properties across Australia. So the business problem there is that if 10 people go in and do an address search and only 9 of them are successful, what are we doing with those 10% as an example? Now, if a company like NAB, as an example, do 300,000 valuation jobs a year, we've got 30,000 there that they're insisting that there's property there. So the outcome we wanted from that group is saying, using the best of what Google have in this space, along with experts in our area, how could we lift that? And these are all simple examples, but in terms of executing that either in a user interface or if a banking client said, hey, here's 200,000 properties, we would like you to value these and return that file, we want to get that percentage as high as possible. So practical examples of that is 10 Smith Street is actually in East Balmain. It's not in Balmain. You may think that's the case because you've got some old sale of contract document or something like that. Or Tyrrell Street has 2 L's, not 1 L.
Yeah.
Or
there's another example that has frustrated me on many occasions, and that is a home or a property that's on a corner location, and for whatever reason, someone's adopted a particular street when it's registered actually in the other street, and that can be very frustrating. Or development's changed, and maybe the the addresses haven't caught up with that. Buildings, another example, where units are named by their building as opposed to the physical address. So yes, I can see that's a very frustrating thing. Were there some solutions that you were able to work through?
Yeah. So what we did there is we worked with test sets that we actually had extracted from our products. So one example was we have around 14% we weren't able to match from this particular product. So what we did, they became our test sample. So once the working prototype had been built, we then went and took those addresses and reflushed them through, and we got around a 4% lift in 3 days. So now, what does that mean in terms of practical use and out there in terms of the product? Well, if I use that NAB example, and don't take these as real numbers, but if they did 300,000 valuations and we said, hey, we've now got a 4% lift, or there's an extra 12,000 properties that we know about. And your example there, Kevin, is quite good. I always thought that was 5 Bolton Court. No, it actually fronts onto Jamison Crescent. And for those people that understand, Australia Post has a DPID, a delivery point address system. There's GNAF. There's a bunch of these resources. So the practical terms there is, if a broker, for example, was on our system, what they're wanting to do is either order a report, or I'd like to get a pest and building inspection, or I'd like a valuation ordered. We then immediately have 4% people more that can find properties. Yes, yeah. And, the ultimate goal here is we want to get 100%. But as you mentioned before, councils changing names, vanity suburbs, those types of things. It's very hard when we're, you're dealing with around 13 million properties across Australia and trying to keep that all in check. So,
it's pretty difficult.
So that was one. That was one of the issues. The other two problems, I'll just talk briefly on those. Another one was around business intelligence reporting. Now, what does that mean is that each of the products that we have out in the market today, they've got Google Analytics. We use a tool called Mixpanel. There's a bunch of analytics which talk to us about the user behavior and what they do once they're on these systems, and how many reports do they order and so forth. Trying to get all that information in one location and then putting meaningful software over the top of that to sort of present back to users is just always a challenge, not just in our business, in plenty of other businesses. So what we use there is, under the Google Cloud, they've got a storage isn't an issue. You can bring in and you can import all this data. And then there's a bunch of tools that we had our teams use, and what we wanted to present back to say, would you like to see a national view or a state view, or, if Kevin's the valuer and he dominates the Blacktown industry, what can we know about him and how he operates in there? So that's quite important for our banking partners, because they're spending a lot of money and they want to see where they're spending it, who they're spending it on, and so forth. And it gives them back sort of those types of analytics as much as it does for our product owners as well. The third business issue is we actually have a tool that is built specifically for NAB. It's an iPad application that is for their valuers. NAB are a little bit different in that they still retain valuation staff on their payroll, whereas the other banks now use national valuation firms. Yeah. And so that tool, what we used there, the high level brief was, how can we make these people more efficient in their day-to-day? So if valuer Joe's got 5 valuation jobs that he has to execute today, we want to see in real time what he's doing. And what we wanted to do was saying, hey, Google, you've got routes, you've got mapping, you've got live traffic, you've got all these amazing tools, and we want to know that if Joe's, for example, got 5 jobs, what's the most efficient way that Joe can run around and do those jobs? What if Joe gets a flat tire and he can't get to a job, and Betty's just around the corner and we can see that? Well, we'll swing that job across to her. So a lot of efficiencies, and at a high level, if the average value is good for 5 jobs a day, using these tools and efficiency, can we lift that to 5.5? Can we lift that to 6? Now, there's obviously benefits there for the bank, using that to say, well, I'm just making the better use of that value as 8 hours out and about doing valuation jobs. So.
Yeah, because that sort of technology would be very valuable in outsourcing too, I'd imagine, where you're not fully in touch with the person you're working with, but you want to keep them a little bit more productive. So, whatever tools you can bring into play would be fabulous. I can see how all of those examples would have taken 3 days to work on. Can I take you just in one other very quick direction, and that is the description of Google's cloud platform environment.
Yep.
So what was that about, and how did that work?
Yep. So in terms of if I talk about cloud computing, and I'll try and make this as simple as possible. So there's players out there.
For me, you have to make it very simple.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. So you'd be familiar with Amazon
Yes.
Web Services.
Yes.
Microsoft have a product called Azure, but the equivalent for Google as a company is called Cloud Platforms. What does that mean? It's like, in terms of any data or processes, etc., that you wish to put in this environment, you're putting it up in the cloud. That's all well and good. Plenty of companies can do that. Where you get the real benefit is, would you like to use the tools that we have that complement and exist in that environment? And in our case, that are going to solve some of these problems. So I'll give you a very simple example, Kevin. Google have a product called BigQuery. Now, what does that mean is that you could go and load in gigs and these days terabytes of data, but if you want to extract meaningful insights on top of that data, BigQuery will come in and allow you to quickly interrogate that data and turn around results far quicker than if you went to the old world of having bought a couple of servers and they're sitting under your desk churning away. Being in a cloud environment, you can quickly add in compute power and in terms of additional servers, and you can increase the sizes of your databases, etc., to quickly turn that around. Other tools, and I could probably spend an hour talking this, but things like machine learning and those types of smarts, is Google's obviously, like a lot of them, on the forefront of that. And us being CoreLogic, not only being a property company, but we're a data and analytics company, we're very interested in the capability of machine learning, and we use that across a number of our products at the moment. So, part of the teams that we assemble, we actually took 4 data scientists down there, and we distributed those across the team, and they were very excited to see the shiny toys, if you like, as part of the Google suite.
Yeah, I can see why it would have been such an exciting 3 days. Isn't machine learning? It's such a huge area, and more and more in demand too, as we see a lot of AI coming on stream. So I think we get a lot more demands in that area. Final comment that I want to touch on came from Rob Jenkins at Westpac, who talked about true technology agility. Where did that manifest itself in the 3 days, and how did that help you get to maybe some final solutions?
Yeah, I think Rob, obviously coming from Westpac Bank, and sometimes getting quick programs up and running, and even though I know Westpac have agile practice within the bank, sometimes it's hard to turn around these things quickly, and suddenly you're 4 or 5 months down the track. So I think the agility says, with unencumbered, what a team could achieve in 3 days, how could you take some of those quicker learnings out and put that into a product that the likes of a Westpac or a NAB could sort of benefit from? And it's, as I said, seeing those presentations across the 3 teams, 3 30-minute presentations in 90 minutes, I think where Rob's coming saying this is the potential here and what we saw in 3 days. So.
My understanding of Agile is that it actually allows you to develop a thought or an idea without taking it all the way through. In other words, don't wait for it to be complete before you implement, but you're working on the project. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're spot on, Kevin. So Agile, typically you break down a 1 or 2 week effort of work, and the idea is that you have this minimal viable product. So if the business decided to launch that, they could do so at the end of 2 weeks. But it also allows you to have the agility to say, actually, this isn't going well at the end of 2 weeks. We need to pivot and move in this direction, rather than having the traditional waterfall project where 7 months, 9 months, 10 months later, you get to the end of the product and things have moved really quickly, and you say, actually, we thought back in March this is a great idea, but by the time we delivered it in October, the market's moved on and there's something different. So agile, and if you've got a product owner that's very much in touch with what the market's doing, can quickly react and as I said, you be agile and move to where you think what your customers are wanting. Yeah,
it's a good description of a project, isn't it? But to be agile, because you're allowing its usage to help you develop the end product, which means you may actually get a product that is working because it's something that's in demand. We are unfortunately out of time. It's been fabulous talking to you, Patrick. Thank you very much. Full marks to all those who were involved in the hackathon. And is there another one planned for the future?
Yes, there is actually. So the good news, in fact, just 2 days ago, Google have confirmed for September. The exciting news, I know you're part of Real Estate Talk and everything. Obviously, the focus of the one that we've just run was very much in the fintech, the banking and finance sort of space. The next one that we'll be running will be more focused on our research platforms. So for those of you users familiar with RP Data and Cordell and Cityscope, there's a few people coming up and tapping on the shoulder. Why weren't I part of this? I said, well, be patient. You can come on to the September one. So
I'm just giving you the pat on the back now to see if I can get included, because I'd love to be a part of that. It sounds like a brilliant. Where is it being held?
Yeah, so it'll also be held at Sydney at Darling Bay, that part of the Darling Harbour precinct where the Google offices are, and it's booked in there again in September. So,
Patrick, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I found it fascinating, and look forward to getting a report back after September as well. So all the best, Patrick. Thanks for your time.
No, thanks, Kevin. I appreciated the chat. Thank you.